Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scarish Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, and this is Adam Diaz, and we
Hello.
are here to talk to you guys, well, chat together, I guess, and at everyone else about all this cool stuff.
Yeah, indeed. I'm pretty excited. So, are you excited?
Yeah, pretty excited.
Awesome. I know we're entering the month of October, which means we're entering a very specific month for you. What is that?
I am doing Season of Serial Killers, so prepare yourselves for each week being introduced, if not, just given more information about a whole bunch of different serial killers.
Right on. Which serial killer are you going to be covering this week?
So I'm going to go for a big one this week, and it's going to be the Zodiac Killer.
Right on. I know that you were back and forth on which one you're going to cover, so Zodiac Killer is super interesting. I'm very excited to hear what you got. I am going to be covering a cryptid known as the Grootslang, but we'll get to that when that time comes. Thank you to everyone who is listening. Currently, if you are listening because you're like, man, I'd really like to hear some homegrown horrors, this is not the episode for that. Robin, what is a homegrown horror?
So homegrown horrors are the stories of paranormal experiences, supernatural, spiritual. We get a bunch of sleep paralysis. Share them with us so we can share them with the rest of our spooky friends.
Indeed. If you have a story like that, please send it our way. Our email address is storytime@scarish.com, or you can hit us up on any of our social medias, facebook.com/scarishpodcast, @scarishpod on Twitter, @scarishpodcast on Instagram, or our website, scarish.com. You can just click on contact us, send us your story that way, and we will read those as long as you've given us permission on our Storytime episodes, which come out every Friday. However, we record those episodes live every Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at youtube.com/scarish and twitch.tv/scarishpodcast. However, that is not what we're doing right now. Those are only for homegrown horrors. Right now, we're doing those topics that we're talking about. And like I had mentioned, I'm covering the Grootslang.
Is that from Guardians of the Galaxy?
I knew it was going to come into play eventually about whether or not this thing is in any relation to Groot. And I'm just going to say no. However, it is my first bullet point to address that.
All right.
So I'll just jump straight into it. So this week I wanted to cover a cryptid. I kind of knew that. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to cover, but I definitely wanted to cover a cryptid. And there are still plenty out there that we haven't covered yet, but not all of them have really extensive stories and backgrounds like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. But if you scroll through enough of the internet, you're going to find some, and some of them have really interesting stuff that actually has a story to it. And eventually I found one of those, and it's kind of exciting because it's something I've never even heard of before. So, dear listener, I present to you the creature known as the Grootslang. And first, obviously, there is some sort of sentient tree joke that I could keep repeating here, and I could keep saying the word Groot. And it's basically like I just have an entire script where it's just I am Groot over and over until the end where I'm like, we are Groot.
Okay.
I'm not going to do that, but I just wanted to get that out there. So let's skip all of those. Plus, this creature really doesn't look anything like a tree. So let's just dive right in. What is a Grootslang? Well, its origin story is pretty old. And I'm not saying the story itself is pretty old. That's probably a few hundred years old. But what the story says is the origin of the Grootslang is really, really old. So when the world was first being made, type of old is what we're looking at here. So maybe while I'm going through this, probably take this with a grain of salt. But this story is the one I was able to locate on the internet multiple times from different sources. Some of them are shady sites, which are just dedicated to cryptids and stuff like that.
Why are those shady?
Well, you can't really trust whether or not this is authentic, real stuff that's happening. And then other things are actual historical documented fact or events that happened. And they talk about the Grootslang and what the origin was. So those are a little bit less shady, but still around the same story. So, that said, here we go. When the world was being made, according to this story, there were a few gods that were just sort of making stuff. They were just seeing, what they could create, probably a dog with two heads and then a dog with two butts. And they're like, oh, I don't know about that. And they're just tossing a bunch of stuff out. It's like that meme you see of, God making people, where it's just add a pinch of this and a dash of that. That's kind of the sort of thing that they're doing right now because the world is just made and they're just sort of tossing things out to see what's going to stick and what's not.
All right.
Side note, this is a story, so don't think I'm making any statements about anyone's belief system or anything. This is just how it goes. So these gods were making these creatures and just sort of tossing them out when they didn't work. And they made this thing that was very, very smart and cunning. Like apex predator level of cunning, but it was also insanely strong. And they all looked at each other and they're like, too much. And the creature was over 50 feet long. It's completely covered in dark scales. And if you were to set eyes on it from the back end, you'd be like, holy shit, that's a super long nope rope. Which is to say, it's a giant dark snake, or at least it looks that way from the back. And it would begin to form this enormous torso the closer you got to what would normally be the serpent's head. And when you got to around the spot that you would imagine that the neck of the snake would begin to form, it would begin to form what appeared to be this enormous torso that's close to 10 feet tall. And it would get wider and more muscular in nature, eventually branching off into two enormous legs. I think two. Most descriptions talk about it being two. I've seen some that say that there are no legs. I've seen some that say that there's 4 legs, but just about everything says 2. So just picture 2 in your mind's eye, okay? It would then end in this massive stumpy foot that would have enormous toenails on it, so not hooves. And aside from that, in the opposite direction, if you were to head up, the neck would widen to almost 10 feet wide, with large leathery appendages that are flat and then would flap out to the side, and these were the creature's ears. And its face would have large gray eyes, not red, but gray. They're large, but they're proportionate to the face. In fact, they might even be undersized. And aside from that, it would lead down to this enormous mouth with razor-sharp teeth that would be flanked on either side with 2 extremely large tusks protruding from either side of this mouth. And finally, its nose would extend out an additional 10 feet, extending in what appeared to be some sort of mouth that would be able to manipulate objects at the end of it. And if you're in your mind's eye room, like creating stuff right now, like if you were at a blank slate and everything was dark and then all of a sudden you started putting this together, or maybe you're in like your matrix room in your brain and you're like sort of creating this creature in your brain, and you're looking at something right now that looks like a snake and an elephant, then you did really, really well. Because basically what this creature is a giant snake combined with a giant elephant.
All right.
So after creating this abomination, the gods were like, this is bad. We've created this horrible thing, and plus it can't decide whether or not it's afraid of mice or whether or not it wants to eat them, so we're probably going to have to get rid of it.
Okay.
That was one of my favorite things ever on Mythbusters that they ever confirmed, was that elephants are actually afraid of mice. So like a tiny little mouse would come out, and elephants would freak out, stop, back up, and turn the other way, and they're like, wow,
Aw, so
that's
cute.
100% confirmed, and they're absolutely shocked. But that is 100% true, so I had to work that in there. So because this creature was so hideous and wrong, they decided with their combined power that they would split this beast in 2. And when they did, they created the world's first snakes and the world's first elephants. So any Grootslang that they had made that had populated the world, they just sort of ripped in 2, and all of a sudden they had these 2 different species. But one Grootslang, some say it was the first Grootslang that they created, some say it was just the largest or most devious, was able to hide away from the wrath of the gods and remain intact, remain this combined sort of abomination. And some say there's only one Grootslang in all of existence anymore. Others say that there's actually many more than that, and they're all born of the original.
Is Nessie a Grootslang?
No, I don't think so. But
Because what if it's just the trunk sticking out of the water?
It could be, or it could just be the tail. But you know what? Other people, when it comes to the Grootslang, say that's stupid and clearly does not exist. So there's basically 3 camps you can be in here. I'm not sure which one I'm in, but we'll see where you guys are at when we're done with this. It existed basically on a diet of elephants that it was able to lure.
What?
Because it looked like one from the neck up. And it apparently existed on this diet for eons. And eventually people too. Because when people showed up, it was like, sure, I'm not going to discriminate. I'll eat people too. And folks throughout the centuries claim to have seen a massive black snake with the torso of an elephant. It's something that recurred in real life for the last several hundred years in this particular part of the world. And I know when I describe this, it sounds silly and it's funny to talk about it like, oh, it's a snake mixed with an elephant, the gods made it, blah, 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 blah. But there are parts of the world where people really, really believe this thing exists.
I've covered dolphin men, with blowholes that mate with people, so I don't think this is that weird.
We've covered some weird stuff, so I think we're kind of desensitized to it. I kind of like to make sure that if someone's jumping in for the first time ever for an episode, we can kind of like ease them in. Like, we understand this isn't the most normal stuff we're talking about, but I found it really interesting that there is a part of the world where they flat out think like this thing does exist. Another thing about the Grootslang is that it supposedly has an affinity for the finer things in life, in particular, diamonds. And as a quick aside, we are aware that we've stated before that Liz Taylor, and by we, that Liz Taylor was the person who said diamonds are a girl's best friend. That's not actually true. It was Marilyn Monroe that said that, and even that's not actually true because Carol Channing sang it first. But Liz Taylor just sort of lived her life with the whole, like, diamonds are a girl's best friend thing, even though that wasn't her thing. Just want to toss that out there. Thank you for all the corrections we got. But the Grootslang also likes diamonds and found a cave that was deep and dark and literally covered in the most perfect diamonds your mind could ever picture, like way nicer than the Hope Diamond. Like that thing was just a turd compared to it, according to the stories. The cave was so nice that the Grootslang decided to basically call it home. So even though it doesn't confine itself to just this one place, it is supposedly like its home base. And the cave, in fact, is famous as well, and it has two names. One of them is the Wonder Hole, and the other one is the Bottomless Pit, right? Which could definitely be euphemisms for so many, very, very many holes. And when I started reading that, I just started singing Wonder Boy in my head by Tenacious D with Wonder Hole as the lyrics instead.
I've never heard that song.
Oh, man. Okay, you're going to have to listen to that after this. The cave is actually said to connect to a massive body of salt water. So it's supposed to be incredibly deep, and even though it's also called like the Bottomless Pit, it's actually supposed to end at salt water. So that said, anytime there's a legend of a cave in particular that's filled with perfect diamonds, someone is going to come knocking sooner or later. And sure enough, that is the case with this legend as well. And this next part I'm about to get into, and multiple parts I'm about to get into, are actually 100% true. Not exactly the things that people say they saw, we can't confirm that for sure, but that people went and tried to find this thing. The Wonder Hole is said to actually be known to exist somewhere near a place called Richtersveld in the country of South Africa. It's actually, like, if you're looking at a map of Africa, it's in South Africa, which means it's on the most southern part of it. It's on the west side, and it's actually really close to the Atlantic Ocean. It's around 30 miles away. And the Grootslang makes the Wonder Hole its home, but it's also said to chill in other caves, swampy areas, and rivers. It's in particular supposed to hang out in the Orange River, which is 35 miles away from Richtersveld. So this is like the perfect location of a town to be where this cave is, and close enough to this river it's supposed to exist in, where folks actually believe that this is like right around where the Wonder Hole is supposed to be, which is supposed to be filled with diamonds. Interesting side note, on a little Google Maps tour I took of the Orange River when I found out that this was nearby, I just sort of like scrolled through from the source to the ocean, and I learned that it almost runs across the entire country of South Africa, from one side to the other. It doesn't quite reach the Pacific Ocean, but it's just short of like 1,400 miles long. So it's a super long river. The other interesting fact is there's actually a place called Grootslang right on the banks of the river, about 400 miles away.
Sounds delicious.
So this creature is very well known across like all of Africa, but especially near this river, people are like, oh yeah, that shit's real. So details of the cave actually existing wind up being tossed around, and finally someone says, I'm gonna be the person that goes knocking. And the man who came and knocking was named Peter Grayson, son of Peter Venkman, legendary Ghostbuster, and Dick Grayson, also known as Robin or Nightwing or Batman, depending on how far you are in the comics. Which is a joke. It's obviously not his real lineage, but you'd think it was to have a set of balls that big, because in 1917, Petey would basically set out from jolly old England to Richtersveld, South Africa, to go find this cave of endless diamonds, knowing very well it's supposed to be guarded by this giant snake elephant. So
he's Indiana Jones if Indiana Jones weren't afraid of snakes.
Yeah, exactly. And like, he was quoted as saying, and this is an actual quote that they credit directly to him, quote, I am determined to return to England as a very rich man, or a dead one. So the dude knew the stakes. He knew what was up, but he decided he was going to go. And when he arrived in town, he gathered himself a team in what was surely a sweet-ass montage, and set out looking for the cave. And some interesting things happened in the course of his journey. And one of those things is that the locals state that he did indeed find the cave nearby. And during the search for the cave, his group was attacked by a pride of lions, and several of his men died in the attack, and others were actually injured, and they headed back to town. And Peter Grayson said, like, y'all head back, like, I'm gonna go get me some mother flipping diamonds, end quote. Not really a quote, but what happened that they know happened was his men were attacked, a bunch of them did die, a few of them survived, and when they asked him what happened, they're like, we found the cave, but he's not coming back. Like, he decided he was going to go in, he wants to find some diamonds. So they waited, and waited, and waited.
He died.
And he never came out. And the locals insist to this day that Peter died in the cave, and his cause of death was Grootslang. No one went in after him. They were just like, he's gone. We're not going to go check for him. We told him we weren't going in there. And that was the end.
But it could have been anything.
It could have been anything. It could have been that the lions followed him in there.
He could have fallen to his death or something
Could have been a bunch of stuff. But what you know for sure is that he died in that cave, without a doubt. And there are no exact coordinates of the cave. They don't write them down anymore and say, like, here's where the cave is. Like, come and check it out if you want. No, these people are terrified of this cave. But if you would like to try your hand at retrieving a diamond yourself, you can look up Richtersveld on Google Maps. And it is literally this tiny, tiny town that you can imagine. This tiny, tiny town in the middle of nowhere, South Africa. And to be honest, like, when I was looking at the pictures of it, it reminded me of the town of Perfection from the movie Tremors. Do you remember Tremors?
Yes.
It's like this super small, obviously self-sustaining town, and it's just surrounded by desert and wilderness. And, like, that's what it reminded me of, which makes me want to call this thing a graboid, but I'm not going to do that.
What if it is?
It doesn't look like it could be, but definitely the scenes where it's, like, running underneath the ground, like, if it somehow managed to do it, it just doesn't seem like the creature that would, but I guarantee you it would look terrifying.
Isn't later in Tremors, there's the scene where it breaks through, like, the basement wall, and it's a big flower with all these tentacles and stuff.
Well, it's not a flower, but it's a worm with, like, a bunch of tentacles spilling out of its mouth. Yeah, for sure.
So couldn't that be like the Groot thing, where it has the extra little elephant trunk thing?
Yeah, but it also is supposed to have, like, the face of an elephant and the torso of an elephant and the front legs of an elephant.
It's a tremor.
And they just sort of left that out. They're called graboids. They're not called tremors.
Whatever.
So
graboids is a dumb name.
That's so funny because the guy who names them gets eaten. But Peter was not the only person to attempt to penetrate the wonder hole for the glory that awaits within. Which is a weird sentence, but it's true. A man named Lawrence George Green wrote about one man he knew who was brave enough to do this, and his story would be published in 1945. And all of the locals and folks who knew the area absolutely refused to go anywhere near where they believed the cave to be. They wouldn't be forthcoming with the location because they sincerely did not want to go anywhere near it. But one dude that Larry G knew was like, I'm gonna go knocking, and he was a little bit better prepared than Peter was. And according to Larry in his book, and I'm paraphrasing here, his buddy found the cave. And he states that when you find the cave, you can hear this loud boom coming from the depths of the cave at intervals that make it seem like large waves colliding with like a shoreline. So it definitely had that sense where it was connected to the ocean, which is still like 30, 40 miles away or whatever. And his buddy, who we'll call Ray, who's not named Ray, that's just the name I'm giving him because it's another Ghostbuster, went and got himself a cable and a winch and lowered himself down there. And he descended deeper and deeper into the wonder hole. And according to him, it was dark and really, really hot. And if you're hoping for hot, sticky, and sweet, you're going to get 2 out of the 3 because it was not sweet. But as he was being lowered in, a colony of bats flew out from deep in the cave, and Ray dropped his flashlight because he was so scared, because he's an idiot. And there were multiple tunnels that appeared to lead out of the main shaft as he was being lowered into it, which, in my opinion, leads me to think that these shafts are probably likely running to other exits or other bodies of water, and that there was this network of caves that attached to it, because he saw something, but he couldn't really investigate it. And that is purely my speculation, because when Ray noticed the smell of sulfur getting stronger and stronger, he left. He got the fuck out. He was like, I'm done with this. Like, pull me back up. And it was the only time that Ray would go down into the wonder hole. No one else would ever attempt this, according to them, and no word on whether or not he found a river of slime, because that's like the exact scene from Ghostbusters 2 when they're lowering him down like 5th Avenue and he finds the river of slime. There's even a winch and a cable involved. So it's very reminiscent of that movie, but he doesn't find anything. He's just like, I actually think this is a lair of a creature. Get me the hell out of here. I don't want to die. So he does. And he never goes in there for diamonds again. He's just like, here's what I saw. I don't know why I went down there, but there you go. And there was also a guy named Lieutenant Fred C. Cornell who wrote a book detailing an encounter with the Grootslang that took place in 1920. And this encounter isn't exactly the same type of thing that other folks had happen, but it's still pretty funny. So the story is, and again, I'm paraphrasing, that Fred here had gone down to the Orange River to prospect and try and find some stuff worth money. So like precious stones, things like that. And his group of folks that were with him, they were totally cool with it. They weren't going to investigate the Grootslang's cave or anything like that. But he was there because he wanted to basically like figure out ways where they could find precious stones. And one of the ways that people do that is to take like their pan or whatever and shake it in the river and see what comes up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Very popular way to do it. And of course, he wanted to go do this at the Orange River. So his group of folks went with him. And when they reached the Orange River, he was like, all right, I'm going to set up camp and start a fire here. You guys set up your own fire over there. And in the morning, we'll see if this river has anything worth money. And the locals were like, nah, like this fire is good right here. And they made their camp really, really close. And they sat at Fred's fire. And like picture a group of people sitting around a fire shoulder to shoulder, super cramped. And that's what this situation was. And Fred was like, all right, so like what's the deal? Because you guys are acting weird. And his folks told him flat out like, so that river has some shit in it besides precious stones. And they let him know, like, when the light comes up, you're going to be able to see it. There's a rock in the middle of the river. It's a really big rock. And it's known to be the place of residence of a Grootslang. And it's not its home, but it's there a lot, and it likes to hang out in this river. So Fred asked around. He asked all the folks that were in the camp, and even later on, after the events that are about to unfold, he asked more folks in South Africa that he knew, and everyone came back with the same thing. Like, this was a matter of fact to them. They're like, oh yeah, the Grootslang is real. Like, that shit'll kill you. You better be careful. And so he was actually like, oh, wow, these guys are taking this serious. Like, this isn't something where they're trying to warn me off of it. They're treating this as if it were a hazard. And they even told him, like, it's not safe for the horses to be this close. Like, it'll either lure it to land or the horses will be lured to the water.
Because the graboids will come out and grab it.
They can get you anywhere. The rock would be the safest place if this was a graboid, actually. This really lent a credence to this story for him. And he's like, all right, well, we'll take care of this, but we're not leaving, man. Like, I came a long way to come here, and it's way too late at night for us to leave. That's dangerous in itself. So he said, in fact, and this is so creepy, that the only thing that bothered him throughout the night was, quote, the huge, long-legged tarantulas that kept running with incredible swiftness into the fire where they sizzled, squirmed, and smelt unpleasantly.
Why would they run straight into the fire?
I put as a side note, why did they run into the fire? I imagine it's so they could return to hell, because that's where all spiders are from.
Or they're trying to get away from the big other monster that's around.
Whatever it was, they were just killing themselves. It's like moss to a flame type of thing, but giant tarantulas instead, which is just an image that's going to haunt me. So the next morning, when the sun comes up, everyone's awake. The river is super calm. It's just this flat, reflective, dark surface.
And then something bursts out of it.
And sure enough, in the middle of the river, he spots this rock that these folks have warned him about, like the supposed home of the Grootslang. And don't think like a singular rock. Think like a giant rock. And don't think it's perfectly shaped either. It's kind of shaped like Pac-Man. So there's like a section of it missing, so it's almost like a cove within the rock. And that's supposed to be a roundabouts where the Grootslang likes to hang out and wait for things to show up if it's not like going around in the river itself. And he took their threat so seriously that they started searching the water that was like shallow for this creature, and they started going out there with boats and looking for this thing. And the closer they got, he was like, all right, cool, so we're going to see if this Grootslang thing is real or not.
Did they poke it with a stick?
He took out sticks of dynamite, and he started lighting them and just throwing them into the river. And they're exploding, and like that super serene view of this lake, or of this river that was just totally flat, is ruined, and it's kicking up like all of this dirt and mud up into the sky and killing off a bunch of fish. And they just keep doing it all around the rock, and nothing's showing up. And everyone's super on edge at this point, but nothing's showing up, and they start to get a little bit relieved. And then there's a crack in this rock now from all the explosives, and everyone sees something move within the crack. And Fred and a bunch of the folks he was with drew their rifles, and they just start shooting in the crack. And this is according to Fred. And they're probably all screaming at the exact same time that they're shooting, and they just unload their clip. They unload their entire magazine. All their ammo gets shot into this rock, and when they're done, nothing comes out. And like the silence is just completely deafening because of that ringing that comes after you shoot a gun, and it had just gone on for like forever. And then finally a duck comes out from this crack unharmed, shook itself and shook all the debris off of it.
Wow.
And quacked at them, and then went about its day. And they didn't see this thing. It was a false alarm. But he had been freaked out so bad by the locals telling him about the Grootslang that he didn't even want to panhandle, or shouldn't. I guess it is panhandling. That is what you call it, right?
I thought panhandling's when you ask for money.
I think that's what it's called now, but I don't know. But he didn't even want to use this portion of the Orange River anymore, even though this is probably the only spot that would have been clear. And I thought the story would have been super cool if like a giant chunk of gold would have floated up, or they found some sort of precious stone from all the blasting. But no, all they did was confirm that there wasn't a Grootslang there at that moment, and freak themselves out and waste a bunch of dynamite. But that's how insistent folks were there that this thing was real. They're like, we can't go in there or else we're probably going to die.
Maybe the Groot thing this whole time was a duck. And it's just like, yeah, it's a quacker.
Wow. It was just a duck this whole time. It wasn't a 50-foot long snake elephant.
Yeah.
Did you say quackers?
Yeah, you guys are quackers.
What is that supposed to be?
Like, you crazy, but you're quackers.
Okay, I've never heard quackers before. Hearing those stories, knowing our listeners, some of you out there might be feeling kind of adventurous. If not, maybe a little bit greedy. And I just want you to know that if you decide to go looking for the Wonder Hole or the Grootslang, there is one more detail you should probably know. The Grootslang's level of intelligence is high enough where if you come face to face with it, you can actually bribe it to let you go. And it said that you can actually present the Grootslang with a token, in particular, a really nice diamond. And if it likes it enough, it'll let you leave or let you live, depending on how you want to look at it. And in my perusing of the internet, I found a website called hauntedcuriosities.com. This is the final thing that involves the Grootslang that I'm going to tell you about tonight. And it's a bit absurd. On this website, there is a picture of a ring with a blue stone in the middle. Didn't exactly look like a real diamond to me, but I don't have a perfect eye for things like this, so let's pretend that it is. And this piece on this website has a description of when the author, or the owner of this, who is a lady, traveled to what she calls the bottomless pit, which is the other name for the Wonder Hole. I guess she didn't like the name Wonder Hole because of her experience. So her dad had taken her there as a girl, and they had explored particularly for the fauna, or, the plants of the region in the cave in particular. And while they decided to make camp within the bottomless pit, she, of course, gets up and wanders away deeper and deeper into the cave. And eventually, she accidentally stumbles upon the Grootslang while it is sleeping. And this is all written like this is 100% fact and happened recently. She tries to sneak away, but it winds up waking up and it comes face to face with her.
Sounds like it's just the big dragon from The Hobbit.
Well, yeah, it's like it guards treasure because it likes really fine stuff. Now, she didn't actually offer the Grootslang anything. Her defense was to reach up and try and pet the thing. Which, if you're young and you're terrified, doesn't sound like something you would do, but maybe she was brave and she was like, perhaps I'll make a friend. And when she reached up with her hand, the Grootslang actually gave her a, quote, priceless item. And it was of a quality she had never seen before, and it placed it right in her hand. And then it left. She doesn't state if she ran out of there screaming, which you would imagine you would if this actually happened.
Right.
But she does state that she never went back. And the ring apparently has the ability, according to the description, to protect, heal, and guide you. And this priceless piece can be yours for a mere $500.
Sounds like bullshit.
Yeah, and the ring looks really dirty, and it has like a maker stamp on it, like on the actual band, where like someone puts down like their stamp of like, you know, who they were that made it. So I was like, so did someone leave this in the cave, or does the Grootslang actually forge things and market so folks know that it came from its cave? And for $500 for a large diamond like this seems like a steal, so probably isn't true. And I think what this story proves beyond anything else is that regardless of where a cryptid comes from or its origins, some asshole out there is going to try and sell you something attached to it. Like, the story comes with multiple pictures of the ring, but not a single piece of photographic evidence of the time spent in Africa, or the girl with her dad, or the cave, which seems odd for people who were there exploring and documenting the fauna of this particular cave.
It's because it's the one ring to rule them all.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be a bunch of other rings, though, right?
Yep.
Or are those already done? Like, those got dropped into Mount Doom or whatever?
I think the dragon is just like, no, dog. You only need this one. Don't worry about the other ones.
Okay.
That's why it's only $500. There's more out there.
It's super cheap. They just want to get it out in the world to start taking people over. But whatever. The idea of a super smart, super strong elephant snake living in caves covered in diamonds in South Africa is more than enough to make me want to believe. That's a pretty cool story. I was kind of upset I never heard about it, and it's pretty awesome, let's be real. And let's just go ahead and say that if we hit 50,000 patrons, we're going to go ahead and travel to South Africa in the middle of nowhere.
No, we're not.
And look for this diamond cave.
It's not happening.
And try and find this snake elephant.
Nope.
So it sounds like it's going to be a solo adventure, but 50,000 patrons, mark my words. By we I mean I, will go, get all my shots to make sure I don't die while I'm over there, or get really, really sick, and try and see if I can be the person that wanders into a cave and never comes out again.
Watch, one day in the way future, we're going to get 50,000, and you're going to be like, oh no, remember that one time in episode 100 whatever, and I said I was going to do this? I lied.
If we have 50,000 patrons, I'm not lying, I will go. So go ahead and everyone sign up and make multiple accounts and push us to 50,000, and I will follow through, and I will go and do this thing. And just typing that, honestly, when I was typing this script up, I can say that I was way more nervous about seeing a bunch of giant fucking tarantulas than anything else. But hey, that is my solemn promise to you, the listener. And that, my spooky friends, is the legend of the Grootslang.
Nice.
Thank you.
Cool.
It was fun to find one that I've never, ever heard of. And
I'd never heard of it either.
What was really funny is I kept looking up more and more stuff and like getting like the second and third page of Google to see if I could find like anything like fresh or like anything super, super unique. And that's where I found the ring. But aside from that, I also found like homebrew content for all of you people playing D&D 5th edition. And someone made the Grootslang.
What if that ring is that part of D&D? Like it's just an item that someone's made up for D&D.
It could be, but they're
it's
actually
like 500
selling it.
gold.
Like you can add it to your cart and buy it with US currency. But the creature is a challenge rating 26 if anyone gives a shit, which some people don't even know what that means, but people who play D&D are like, damn, that's powerful. Like, yeah, it's a legendary creature. But there you go. Hope you folks enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, moving on from the cryptozoological creature thing you got going on there, I'm going to move on to my season of serial killers. And I just wanted to thank all our Choose Your Adventure patrons that we have that helped choose which serial killers I'm going to cover this month.
I thought you were going to thank the serial killers, and I was like, that's a really weird shout out.
No. So we do have a whole bunch of tiers, one of which is helping us choose the topics that we're going to do. So a whole bunch of people voted, and Zodiac Killer is one of the top ones, so I'm going to get into it. So the Zodiac Killer is an unidentified killer who was active during the 1960s and 70s. And the case of the Zodiac Killer is notable because of the fact that they sent a bunch of letters and cards and things like that to news media outlets taking credit for a whole bunch of different killings. And each included like a strange cryptogram or a weird message. And later on, it's like scoring. It's really weird. Only one of the cryptograms has ever been definitively deciphered. So it's a little strange. And
that's the thing I know most about the Zodiac Killer. Aside from the fact that he or she was never caught, is that there's these crazy things that they sent that were never deciphered. And it, like, when you told me you were doing it, I was like a little bit jealous, but I was also like a little bit relieved that I don't have to get out my murder board and try and solve like the Zodiac killer's messages. Because how many people have tried to do it at this point, you know?
It's not going to happen. I don't think it's ever really going to happen. I looked at a whole bunch of pictures and it just seems impossible.
I think he's a time traveler and he came back to kill people that were going to do like things later on that he had to prevent. That doesn't mean he's a good guy. It could be like an evil time traveler, like trying to kill John Connor. And maybe these things were like time coordinates, which is just the most absurd thing. But I always turn everything into Terminator.
Okay, well, I don't think that's the case, but we'll get there. Anyway, the Zodiac has claimed to have had 37 victims, but there are only 7 that were really confirmed, and 2 of which have survived, and then a number of other suspected victims. But if you folks are squeamish about murder, feel free to jump forward through the nitty-gritty parts and things like that. I don't think I covered anything super gory or anything like that, but some people are like, murder, meh. Anyway, so the first victims were a high school couple named David Faraday, who was 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, who was 16. And on December 20th, 1968, they were both on their first date, which is super sad, and had planned to attend a Christmas concert at Hogan High School, 3 blocks from where Jensen lived. Their plans changed because whose doesn't, and instead of choosing to go to the concert, they chose to go visit a friend before heading to a local restaurant and then driving to a location of their eventual demise, which is really, really sad.
It was really sounding like a nice first date.
But at 16 and 17, you're like, oh, do we really want to go to this concert, or do we want to just sit in my car and make out all night? You know what I mean? You're 16.
Yeah. You never know, in whether you're an adult or you're 16, which decisions you make are going to lead to your grisly and untimely death.
So at around 10:15 p.m. that night, Faraday parked their car in a gravel turnout known to be the local Lover's Lane on Lake Herman Road in Benicia, California. And at 11 p.m., not long after, their bodies were found by Stella Borges, a woman who lived nearby the area. To me, it's like why she was in the area so late is something that I'd want to know.
That is strange.
Did she hear a noise and come by, or saw headlights, or these little rendezvous between the local youths is like a common thing? So
was she
comes
going up there to like break it up?
Yeah, or something like that. But her coming along, I'm just really curious about it. Investigators weren't able to come up with any leads on what happened, but Robert Graysmith, a political cartoonist for the San Francisco Chronicle, was able to postulate from a whole bunch of different forensic data that is available to the public, postulate the events of the night and what happened. So he believes what happened was that a second car pulled into the gravel drive a bit before 11 p.m. and then pulled right up next to the couple and then parked. So what seems to have happened is the killer then exited their vehicle and then walked towards Faraday and Jensen, possibly ordering the couple to exit the car. We say possibly because obviously no one really knows the circumstances in which these things took place. What is known is that Jensen seems to have exited the car first, with Faraday only being halfway out of the car when the killer then just proceeded to shoot Faraday in the head like a dickhead. And then Jensen ran about 20 feet away before she was killed by 5 shots in the back. So there was like no chance for her, you know what I mean?
So many times with serial killers too, they have like this really specific MO of like strangulation or stabbing, you know what I mean? And the Zodiac killer just seems where it's like he just showed up to kill people. You know what I mean?
But I think there is a certain thing that he did with a couple of the different victims. And it seems like shooting them was the most common thing. It wasn't like he had a kink for strangling or something like that. You know what I mean? It was just he shot people. That's what he did. It just was what he did after he did those shootings when it came to mailing in letters about stuff like that. The killer then drove off, and what it seems like for these two is just they seem to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the killer just saw this as an opportunity to dip his feet into the world of murder. And maybe he thought about killing for a while. There are a couple reports of him having started murdering way earlier and only recently, how do I explain this? So there are people that say he did kill earlier in time, not starting at 1968, but before that, a couple different murders before that. But no one knows for sure because he didn't admit to it in the letters that he sent to all the news outlets. But it just seems like these were opportunistic. Like he drove in, saw that there were kids there, and was like, I'm going to do it this time.
That's even sadder because it's totally wrong place, wrong time type of thing.
Right. Gray Smith, over the next 13 years, the political cartoonist for the Chronicle, over the next 13 years after the letters from the Zodiac started arriving, totally became obsessed with figuring out all the information about the Zodiac. He's written 2 books on the case and actually attributes his divorce directly to his obsession with the Zodiac, which is crazy.
I've never seen the movie Zodiac, but isn't it based off of some of the stuff
It's his
he
book.
wrote? Okay.
He literally wrote a book called Zodiac, and that's what the movie Zodiac is based on. And there's a whole bunch of movies about the Zodiac killer, but there is a movie called The Zodiac. Anyway, so July 4th, 1969, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were only 4 miles away from where the Lake Herman Road site was. And they parked at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, where they stay in Ferrin's car. And then a second car comes into the lot that they were parked in, parks alongside the car, only to leave almost immediately. So he comes in, parks, like, I'm going to leave, leaves. And then about 10 minutes later, that same car returns and then parks directly behind them, probably to box them in. I don't know what this park looks like, but if a car is parking behind you, it's usually so you can't go anywhere. And then the driver exits the car, approaches the passenger side of Ferrin's car, and they were carrying a flashlight and a 9mm Luger, which is a gun, if you didn't know. They proceed to flash the light into their faces, blinding them probably so they don't know what they look like, and then shoots them 5 times. So he shoots at them 5 times. They're both hit with several bullets, and then the shooter walks away. Mageau, though, starts moaning because he's still alive, right? And so this guy comes back and then shoots them both twice again.
Wow.
Yeah. So this guy is ruthless, super big douchebag.
How do they know that he walked away? I mean, obviously you can put all this stuff together from like clues at the scene, but like that's just so horrible to know that like the person survived, made a noise, so he went back and was like, 2 more each.
Well, so at 12:40, just past midnight, a man phones in to the Vallejo Police Department reporting and claiming responsibility for the attack. They also claim to be the ones who committed the Lake Herman Road murders from 6.5 months prior. Police were able to trace the call back to a phone booth at a gas station at Springs Road and Tuolumne, and it was like 0.3 of a mile from where Ferrin actually lived and only a few blocks from the Vallejo Police Department. So this person was so ballsy. He called from a payphone blocks from the police department to tell them, hey, I murdered these people. And this...
It was just a confession, right? They didn't even try and like turn themselves in. They just
No. They were calling to let them know, hey, I killed these people.
Wow.
And it's just really messed up. Ferrin was later pronounced dead at the hospital, but Mageau survived the attack, which is how they know he did this, and this. This is what happened. And he survived despite getting shot in the face, the neck, and the chest. He was so ridiculously lucky to have survived. This was the first time that the killer was able to be described because obviously he blinded them first when he first shot them, but then the second time he came back, I don't think he did the same thing. So he just came back, shot him just to make sure, and so he was able to describe him, and what he described him as was a male of about 5'8", so not too tall.
Right.
He had short, light brown, curly hair, and he was what appeared to be 26 to 30 years old, 195 to 200 pounds, maybe more. And I can see the weight being hard to pinpoint because I am atrocious at the guess your weight game.
Yeah.
I'm really not good at
Does
it.
anyone else, when they hear descriptions of these horrific crimes, like let out kind of a sigh of relief, like, whew, wasn't me? Like, you know it's not you, but when you hear the description is so far different than you, you're like, okay, cool, no one's going to blame me for this, even though this is from, like, 1969? Or am I just weird? Okay, sorry.
So then the letters started coming in. So on August 1st, 1969, 3 letters were sent from the killer himself to the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. And they were each nearly identical, described by a psychiatric professional to have been written by someone, quote, you'd expect to be brooding and isolated, end quote. Like, this is just some guy who probably sits alone and just is upset at his life. I don't know. That's what the psychiatrist is saying. But the letters had the killer taking responsibility for the shootings at both the Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs locations. And they also included 1/3 of a 408 symbol cryptogram that the killer claimed contained the answer to his identity. So each place got 1/3. Each of the newspapers got 1/3 of this cryptogram. The killer threatened that if they did not publish the letters on the front page of each paper, he would go on to, quote, cruise around all weekend, killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again, until I end up with 12 people over the weekend, end quote. Like, this guy is absolutely insane.
And controlling the media, which is, like, I understand that serial killers want exposure, but this is very unique. Obviously, it's very unique because the Zodiac killer is very famous, but I didn't, like, know this particular detail. It's kind of terrifying.
So the Chronicle ended up printing its 1/3 of the cryptogram on page 4 of its next paper. So didn't do it on the front page, but they did print it. And they also included the quote from the chief of the Vallejo police, Jack E. Stilts, and he said, quote, we're not satisfied that the letter was written by the murderer, end quote. And they requested that whoever wrote it write a second with more facts to prove their identity.
I feel like it's trying to get a better idea of who this person is by telling them to write in and say more, you know?
Right.
Rather than trying to coax them out to go and, like, kill another person.
None of the threatened murders ever actually happened that weekend, but all parts of these letters were eventually published in all the papers. On August 7th, 1969, another letter was received by the Examiner that was the first to include the self-declared name of the killer. It began, quote, Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking, end quote. So he gave himself his own name. Killers don't really do that, I feel
Lots
like.
of people don't give themselves their own nickname. It's like that joke from Dana Carvey, like, would you mind calling me Sting? Like, you just don't do it. Like, someone else gives you your nickname, you know?
So this letter included details that the authorities were looking for concerning evidence that they wanted to decide whether or not this was the writer that acted out all the murders and things like that. It included details that were not yet available to the public, stating that when they finally crack the encryption, quote unquote, they will have me. And it's so frustrating what happens with that whole encryption thing.
He probably sent out something that was, like, just nonsense, you know? Just to, like, put people on this case of examining evidence that wasn't actually evidence. You know what I mean?
So by August 8th, 1969, Donald and Betty Harden from Salinas, California, cracked the code. All 3 parts of the code. What the most frustrating part of it was that it never included the identity of the killer. It included a misspelled message stating that the killer was collecting slaves for the afterlife and that the killer wouldn't give away his identity either because it would slow down or even stop his ability to build his slave collection. And so the complete solution to the cipher goes as follows. Quote, I like killing people because it is so much fun. It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill. Something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and the I have killed, it's like super bad grammar, super misspelled stuff, right? Will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife. And then that's followed by 18 letters at the end, and that's the end of the quote. So the 18 letters at the end have not yet been deciphered because it's just a mix of a bunch of vowels and consonants. So they've already deciphered the rest. It's just these 18 letters, no one can figure out how to separate them, how it's supposed to be, and it's just super confusing. There are a lot of words in the letter that are so misspelled, and it seems, and that's not the first message that's misspelled either. There's letters later on that have really weird things that are spelt incorrectly. So it kind of makes you think that maybe this person isn't all that educated, but the fact that they've gotten away with murder for so long makes you think, oh, maybe they're good at something else, you know?
Yeah, there's a big difference between being educated and being smart, you know?
Right.
And clearly they're smart enough to keep themselves out of jail, but they just might not know proper grammar or spelling of certain things.
So let's slide forward in time to September 27th, 1969. A couple of Pacific Union College students named Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were having a cute little picnic at Lake Berryessa on a small island connected by a sand spit to Twin Oak Bridge. And here the description of the person is a bit different. There was a Caucasian man of about 5'11", weighing more than 170 pounds that approached them. So that part's a little similar, just the height is different. He had combed, greasy brown hair in a black executioner's type hood that had clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes and a bib-like device on his chest with a white 3-diameter circle and a cross through it. Kind of like a target or like the Slender Man logo.
I've never really seen the Slender Man logo. I'm
it's just
imagining
like a circle. So it's like a crosshair. Yeah. A little messier than that, but pretty much kind of the same shape, right? And this guy must have looked absolutely ridiculous. He approached them with a gun, Hartnell believed to be a .45, so 45 caliber. And how he's able to know the caliber of said gun is odd. Maybe he's a gun enthusiast or a gun aficionado or something like that. He's able to tell just from looking at it. But the hooded man claimed to have been an escaped convict from either Colorado or Montana, which a police officer later inferred to mean Deer Lodge, Montana. So I'm not sure about that, but apparently there's a jail there in Deer Lodge, and that's what they think he was talking about. So the hooded man continues to state that he killed a guard, stole a car, and now he needed Hartnell and Shepard's car and some money so that he could get to Mexico because his stolen car was overheated, apparently. It just seems like some overtold story, like way too much detail. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you just need to stop. You're a convict. You need the car. They need to get out. Obviously, he was there for more than that. The man brought pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline and told Shepard to tie up Hartnell before he then tied her up. And he went on to check her work on Hartnell's ties, only to find that she'd done a very loose job because obviously she's not going to tie her boyfriend up all the way. Hartnell just thought that this whole thing was a strange robbery until they were both repeatedly stabbed. Hartnell was stabbed 6 times and Shepard was stabbed 10 times. So it was a lot.
Yeah, I thought serial killers stick to like one specific MO and type of murder, and like he switched from shootings to stabbings now.
It just, he had the gun on him. It's not like he didn't have a gun. I just think he wanted to test out something different. The attacker then proceeded to hike 500 yards up to Knoxville Road, where he drew the circle cross symbol into Hartnell's car door with a black felt tip pen. So like a Sharpie, I assume. And I mean, there are other felt tip pens that I'm sure can write permanently on a door. But underneath the symbol, he wrote Vallejo, and under that was the date 12/20/68, and then under that was 7/4/69. Under that was September 27th, 69. at 6:30, and under that just said by knife. So what he was doing was writing every date of the killings in the area, and then all the way up until the date and time of when he killed this couple and how he killed this couple. So this is just adding more stuff. But like, whether or not this was actually the Zodiac is what I'm super curious about.
Or it could be someone trying to attach it to the Zodiac killer.
Right, and then the Zodiac just ends up mailing these letters and saying, yeah, I did it. You know what I mean? So it's hard to tell with all these things. Anyone could mail in a letter and say, yeah, it was me. And there's not enough evidence to discern whether or not it was. And this whole thing is just such a fascinating case because it really could have been a whole bunch of different people.
Right.
It's just crazy. A man and his son were fishing in a nearby cove when they heard the couple's screams for help and came only to discover the bodies and continued on to contact the park rangers. And the funny thing is I saw a park ranger SUV the other day and it made me think, how does one become a park ranger? Because you have to deal with so many illegal things when it comes to hunting and fishing and things like that. And then you have to deal with something like a double murder.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I'm pretty sure it gets turned over to someone else. You just find it.
Right.
And then call in the authorities. But still, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, people, and they work in these pretty desolate areas in the woods. You know, they're nowhere near anything else. I'm just really curious. What makes you decide, like, hey, this is what I want to do?
You just think there's a park ranger nearby that's super hot, and that's why you want to think about it. Like, I want to know his story. Like, he
was
cute.
Super hot, though. Okay. So, anyway, at 7:40 p.m. that night, the killer called the Napa County Sheriff's Department from a payphone to report this crime. So this is exactly what they did the last time. They called the police from a payphone somewhere. The caller stated that he wished to, quote, report a murder. No, a double murder, end quote. That's what he said.
That's the casual nonchalantness of that is like, I'll take 1 scoop. No, 2 scoops of ice cream. Yeah. That's just ridiculous.
Well, when I go to the parlor, I know either I want 1 or I want 2. But, you know, it's usually 1. 2's too much. Unless you're getting 2 flavors.
If you're talking about murder, I'd think 1 was too much. But with ice cream, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. That's why I said when I go to the parlor. I don't go to a murder parlor.
I don't know what kind of parlors you go to.
So, this statement was followed by the admission that he was the one who did it. Minutes later, the phone was found off the hook by a radio reporter for the KVON at the Napa Car Wash on Main Street. And again, this was only a few blocks from the sheriff's office. So this guy's going out of his way to be near the cops. It was 27 miles away from the crime scene. It's absolutely insane.
You traveled 27 miles to be a few blocks away from the sheriff's station.
Right.
To call.
Right. It's like they want to be as close to the police as possible when they confessed, like some kind of adrenaline rush thing. Police were able to lift the palm print from the phone that was still wet, apparently. So he must have been sweating or something and touched the phone, and they were able to get his palm print. I had no idea palm prints were a thing because I mean, I know fingerprints are different for everyone.
Right.
I didn't realize palm prints were different too. But it makes sense if people could read palms and the lines are different. And
I
things
imagine
like
your
that.
lines are very, very unique, similar to how they are for your fingertips. So it's something that I've not heard of either.
Yeah.
So it's good to know, like, just wear rubber gloves if I'm ever going to commit a crime because my palm print might be, you know, something they could get me with, but I don't really plan on doing anything.
That's weird. When I started any government job, I don't remember getting my palm scanned.
Yeah, I've only ever had fingerprints.
I've had fingerprint scanned, but anyway. So, Napa County deputies Dave Collins and Ray Land were the first on the scene, and Cecilia Shepard was still conscious upon their arrival and was able to give them a detailed description of their attacker. Hartnell and Shepard were both ushered to the hospital where Shepard lapsed into a coma and never regained consciousness, passing away 2 days later. Hartnell survived to recount the events of that night. The Napa County Sheriff Detective Ken Narlow worked to solve the case all the way up to his retirement in 1987. So This guy worked on the case for so long.
For 20 years.
And couldn't find anything. That's just so unfortunate. Only 2 weeks later, on October 11th, 1969, a Caucasian male entered the cab of Paul Stein at Mason Street and Geary Street in San Francisco and requested to be taken to the intersection of Washington and Maple in a place called Presidio Heights. I looked it up, and it's definitely in San Francisco. I looked at all the streets. I was like checking it out to see. I thought that was really interesting. And for some reason, probably because the driver was being threatened, Stein drove a block past Maple over to Cherry Street. And then the passenger proceeded to shoot Stein in the head with the 9mm. So it's the same gun as the first killings.
Now we've moved back from knife to gun.
Right. They took Stein's wallet and car keys and tore a section of Stein's bloodstained shirt tail. So he ripped off a piece of the shirt, probably a big strip, because they use it later. Anyway, so 3 teenagers across the street witnessed it happening around 9:55 p.m. and called the police. They witnessed the man wiping down the cab and then walking a block north towards Jackson. So this guy's smart. He knows to wipe all his fingerprints, to wipe any evidence, because if he sat down in the car, his hair could have fallen out somewhere. There are just so many ways your DNA could end up in the car.
This is the 60s still, right? Like late 60s.
Late 60s. Yeah. When did DNA
like
start
not until
used?
Much later, like the 90s.
Oh,
like it
really?
started to become like definitive evidence where you could actually use it to put someone away.
Okay. So, well, they could have still gotten the DNA though, right?
I mean, they didn't really even know to collect it at that point.
Okay. So I looked it up. Jackson is definitely north. I looked at this map. I don't know why. I'm like big on maps right now. But the teens described him as looking 25 to 30 years old. He was white with a crew cut and about 5'8" or 5'9". So a lot of the descriptions are starting to kind of meld together. The kids worked with police to come up with a composite sketch of who they saw. I sent it to Adam, so he'll be posting it tomorrow on our Instagram if you guys want to check it out.
I was getting really, really creepy messages from Robin while we were doing
Yeah.
this. I was like, what is she threatening me with right now?
So a police unit 2 blocks away, Don Folk and Eric Zelms, responded to the call. They witnessed a Caucasian man walking on the sidewalk east. So he was walking in eastern direction on Jackson Street and was stepping into a stairway leading to the front yard of one of the homes on the north side of the street. And this whole sighting of this guy lasted between 5 and 10 seconds. It was super duper quick. And based on that sighting, Folk estimated that they looked like they were 35 to 45 years old, 5'10", with a crew cut. What's messed up is that the initial dispatch was to be on the lookout for a black suspect. So the kids reported what they saw, which was a white man. And dispatch was like, look out for a black dude. Like, how messed up is that?
They screwed it up.
Yeah, they screwed it up, which is why they drove straight past this dude. The disparity in the description is still unexplained. They have no idea why dispatch would change it like that or why they reported a different thing. The resulting search came up with no helpful findings. Although the murder began as a simple cabbie killing, apparently that's really common in the area or
That's
something.
horrible.
Yeah. I was just mind blown when I said that. When I read the word routine and I was like, that should not be routine.
Routine and murder should never be part of a same
Yeah,
sentence.
it should not be routine. So on October 14th, the Chronicle receives yet another letter from the Zodiac. And this one contained a bloodied shirt piece. And he wrote to take credit for the killing. So he sent in a piece of this guy's shirt. It also included a threat about killing students on a school bus. This guy was totally just messed up and probably high off of the fact that he still hasn't been caught yet. And it's just absolutely mind-blowing. On October 20th, 1969, at around 2 p.m., someone claiming to be the Zodiac killer called the Oakland Police Department demanding 2 lawyers, F. Lee Bailey or Melvin Belly, appear on a local show called AM San Francisco. That's a really specific request.
Yeah, it really is.
Bailey never showed he was busy, but Belly did appear on the show. And the host, Jim Dunbar, appealed to viewers to keep the lines open so that it would allow for the killer to call in. And supposedly he did. Someone called claiming to be the Zodiac and said that his name was Sam. Belly agreed to meet him in Daly City, but he never showed. So, he stood up this lawyer. On November 8th, the Chronicle received a card with a 340 symbol cryptogram. It probably had a whole bunch of different symbols that they had not deciphered or brand new from the original 400 that they had. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm sure it's completely different because it's like, oh, you solved my other one. I'm going to have to change it up on you. This one was never decoded. Solutions were suggested, but none are accepted to be the true decryption of it. November 9th, they receive a 7-page letter stating 2 police officers actually stopped to talk to him 3 minutes after he shot Stein. So he could have been any of the people that they talked to that night. You know what I mean?
That's just haunting so bad right there.
Excerpts from the 7-page letter were published in the November 12th issue of the Chronicle. The same day, Folk wrote a memo explaining the events on the night of Stein's murder, because I'm sure he's like, I have to defend myself because how was I supposed to know if dispatch told me one thing?
Right.
You know what I mean? Exactly 1 year after the first murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, the Zodiac then mailed a letter to Melvin Belli, the lawyer that had appeared on that AM San Francisco show. And the letter included yet another piece of Stein's shirt and stated that he needed Belli's help, that he wanted Belli to help him. And I'm sure maybe he was thinking about turning himself in or something like that, and he wanted a lawyer's help. But that never happens. On March 22nd, 1970, 3 months later, a 7-month pregnant Kathleen Johns was with her 10-month-old daughter driving from San Bernardino to Petaluma to visit her mother. While heading west on Highway 132, I don't know where any of these places are, near Modesto, a car behind them began honking and flashing its headlights. And I've driven some of these freeways, and people can drive absolutely crazy. We've seen some scary stuff while driving where people have been chasing other people down. It's just insane.
Stuff where you're watching it and you're like, someone should call the cops, and that person's probably really dangerous or really, really drunk, which would, be dangerous for sure.
So anyway, she pulled over and stopped, and then the man parked behind her. He approached her, told her he saw her rear right wheel was wobbling, and offered to tighten it. After finishing, he drove off, and when Johns went to pull back onto the freeway, her wheel came completely off. The man returned and offered to take them to the nearest gas station, and they just climbed into the car. Dude, I just don't do it. Whenever I read this kind of stuff, I'm like, she must have known something was sketchy.
But what else is she going to do in this situation? The wheel
be
has
like,
fallen
no,
off
I'm
of
good,
her car.
thank you.
Yeah, and be stranded on the side of the road and then antagonize them. It's that's the thing is you don't have cell phones in this day and age. You're alone with this person who's offering to take you somewhere. Do you say, no, I'd prefer to be on the side of the road alone and hope that they're just cool with that? Or do you go with and hope that you can somehow find help?
I would just lock myself in my car and be like, no, I'm good, thank you. Because if someone did that to you on purpose, if you know they did that to you on purpose.
But do you know? Or did they come up and say yeah, your wheel was wobbling. I tried to fix it for you. It came off. It must be something
Why did he
besides.
come back?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying you're acting like these people should know that this is a murderer. And these people at this point are trying to assume that it's anything but a murderer.
This guy comes, is adamant that you pull over. You pull over. He's like, your wheel's loose. I'm going to fix it for you. He, quote unquote, fixes it. And then your wheel falls completely off.
These people don't have the benefit of the quote unquotes on the things that are happening to them.
I just want everyone to at least just know about your cars and know about how they work. Watch them. If someone's coming to offer to help you, watch them, quote unquote, help you, okay? And make sure they're not fucking with your car. Just watch him and know how to tighten your lug nuts. Or if he's doing it the wrong way or whatnot.
Or since it's 2019 now, call AAA or call a tow truck and be like, no, I'm good, thanks. I got it. And have 911 ready to be called.
But at least have that basic knowledge if you don't have the ability to call someone. Just know, I know how my car works. I know how that wheel works. I know how to change my tires, and you're not doing it correctly. You know what I mean? Just don't just trust people like that and then climb into their cars. But we do it every day, climbing into Ubers and stuff like that. It's just crazy. I just want you guys to be safe and not fall for killer traps. It's just crazy. So on this drive, they passed the gas stations and the man just didn't stop. They kept driving. They drove back and forth for miles for about 90 minutes on back roads. Johns asked why he wouldn't stop, but the man just kept changing the subject. When he finally did stop, Johns jumped out of the car with her daughter and they both hid in the field. The man attempted to search for them using a flashlight, but eventually gave up, driving off. And Johns hitched a ride to the police station in Patterson. And when I read this, I'm like, jumping from one to another. I know you don't want to walk all that distance, but it's just so scary when you're coming from being abducted in one car and then you're like, well, I have no choice. I have to trust someone.
You have to depend on a stranger again.
And it's just, but what are the odds? It's 2 killers in a row. You know
you
what
would
I
have
mean?
to be the most unlucky person on the planet to get 2 different serial killers on the same night.
Lucky for her, it wasn't a killer. They took her to the police station. It's just so scary. I would be too shy to do that, or too scared, not shy.
I was gonna say you're too shy to save yourself.
No. I'd be way too scared to just hop into another car after that. But she does have her 10-month-old daughter, and she's 7 months pregnant.
Right.
That's rough. At the police station, she gives her statement to the sergeant on duty, and while doing so, she notices the composite sketch of Stein's killer, and she recognized him as the man that abducted her. The sergeant had Johns wait in the dark at a nearby Mills restaurant. I don't know why. I guess he was trying to protect her from the kidnapper from coming back. So he's like, maybe they'll come back and kill you all. So you guys should go hide there. I don't know. It was really weird when I read that.
That's some wild speculation right there on something that's kind of bizarre.
Yeah. So anyway, when they found her car, it had been gutted and torched. Some of her statements between police reports and news reports don't really match up, so it's kind of iffy, which is why that whole thing sounds really weird. But you never know. After experiencing something like that, it's hard to remember every single detail all at once because you're freaking traumatized, you know? And it's just really interesting. I think there was an episode of Criminal Minds where they talk about that, where we know you're not going to be able to remember everything right now. So rest a little bit. We'll come back, whatever.
Right. I mean, realistically, like, if you were to just be stopped and asked about some things that happened to you that had just occurred, like, you're not going to get everything correct, you know?
Yeah.
You're just not. And there's certain things where, like, when you're having them happen to you, you know, I need to pay attention right now. But until that triggers, like, how many of the details, like the innocuous things around you, are you going to accurately recall when you weren't really paying that close of attention?
Right. Throughout 1970, the Zodiac continued sending letters and cards. April 20th, 1970, the Zodiac wrote, quote, "My name is," and a 13-character cipher, end quote. So the 13-character cipher was obviously never deciphered. He wanted to know everyone to know that he wasn't the one to bomb a police station in San Francisco on February 18th, 1970, because apparently this killer has a certain set of rules he wants to uphold. The letter included a diagram of the bomb the Zodiac had threatened to use on a school bus, and on the bottom he wrote the little cross circle symbol, 10. So he got 10 points. The SFPD has 0 points. That's what he wrote at the bottom. This guy is absolutely insane. He then sent a card postmarked April 28th, 1970 to the Chronicle, and it said, quote, "I hope you're having yourselves a blast," end quote. And blast was in all caps. And he signed it with the cross circle thing. On June 26th, he wrote, quote, "I shot a man sitting in a parked car with a .38, which is a gun." And then authorities think that it had to be referring to a Sergeant Richard Raditich, who had been shot with a .38 while writing a parking ticket in his squad car a week earlier.
So now he's killing cops.
Yeah. So in the letter with the 13-character cipher, he wrote something like, "There's more honor in killing a cop because cops can shoot back," or something like that. It was so...
Because he's like supposedly a hunter and he's hunting the most dangerous game or whatever.
Yes, exactly. On the bottom of the letter about the shooting with a .38, He signed Zodiac 12, SFPD 0. He also included a map that had an image of Mount Diablo on it and placed a cross circle with a 0, a 3, a 6, and a 9 on each of the points. And he said 0 would be north. On July 24th, 1970, he took credit for Kathleen John's abduction 4 months after the fact, which makes me feel like it wasn't him that did it.
I feel like he waited to make sure they weren't catching up to him before he would admit to it.
Okay.
Like, that's what I got from that, is like, if you abduct someone and they get away and they have all these details that you can't control aside from burning her car, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like, are you going to go ahead and own up to this immediately when the details are still fresh, or months afterwards when you've paid enough attention to know that they're no closer to you?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now you can taunt them about the fact, like, hey, this was me. Like, you guys never got me again.
That definitely makes sense. He also stated that the Mount Diablo code that he sent, quote, concerns radians, and it equals the number of inches along the radians, end quote. And when placed over the map according to the instructions that he gave, it pointed to 2 more Zodiac attacks, which is
super creepy.
Yeah. So this guy's, oh my gosh, he's mapping this stuff out. It's crazy. October 7th, the Zodiac sends an index card signed with the circle cross, supposedly signed with blood. It had 13 holes punched in it. It's like he's counting. It's so creepy. There was a card received later that month that was a bit different than the usual Zodiac letters, so this one's a bit odd. It supposedly mentioned a connection between the unsolved murder of Cherry Joe Bates and the other Zodiac murders. But this one's not fully certain that there's an actual link between them. So that's a little iffy. Another card arrived in March of 1971 to claim responsibility for the disappearance of Donna Lass, followed by 3 years of silence. So after this 1971 letter, 3 years of silence, a letter arrives on January 24th of 1974.
Imagine getting that letter and being like, oh God, it's
He's
starting
back
again.
Yeah. So in this letter, he praises the Exorcist movie as, quote, the best satirical comedy was spelt incorrectly, that I have ever seen, end quote. This guy, he can't be really super educated. He spelled comedy wrong.
I feel like that might be something he's doing on purpose. You know what I mean?
To throw people off?
Yeah, maybe part of the cipher is all the words that he spells incorrectly, like the letters that aren't supposed to be there.
Ooh, maybe.
This is why just show me some of the evidence. We'll go over this.
So it ended with a new symbol no one has yet to explain, followed by the usual Zodiac symbol with the number 37 this time. SFPD 0.
That's super creepy.
It's super creepy.
So he goes under for 3 years, doesn't take credit for anything, comes back, and his total's gone up by about
37.
25.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So there have been a few suspects throughout the years, the latest ridiculous one being like Ted Cruz or something, right?
He's not a suspect. I think people just caught on to this meme.
When I looked, all I did was type in Zodiac Killer into Google, right? And then images is just freaking the sketch next to Ted Cruz 1,000,000 times on the front
because he looks
page.
like the sketch.
It's just so crazy. I was so annoyed. Anyway, people are ridiculous. The internet is ridiculous. Robert Graysmith's book, Zodiac, purports that Arthur Lee Allen is a suspect based on circumstantial evidence, which usually means it's not incriminating enough. So things just like finding a fingerprint at a crime scene, you can't really say that he was the one that did it. It's circumstantial. Allen had been interviewed from early on in the Zodiac investigations and has been the subject of multiple search warrants over the span of 20 years.
Wow.
So the evidence against Allen ended up being negative. Ultimately, there's nothing they can really do. In 1971, Allen's friend Donald Chaney reported to police in Manhattan Beach, California, that Allen spoke of a desire to kill people and use the name Zodiac and secure a flashlight to a firearm for visibility at night, which makes it scary when Kathleen Johns said he was searching for her with a flashlight. It could have been a flashlight attached to a gun that time.
Right.
It's just so crazy. Chaney states that this conversation occurred no later than January 1st, 1969. So it was like right after those first 2 murders occurred. In 1974, Allen was arrested for committing lewd acts on a 12-year-old boy and pleaded guilty. So it's not like Allen was innocent. This guy is not a good guy.
Right.
And it totally makes sense that they looked at him as a suspect. I mean, he was found to be doing shady things. The fact that his friend's like, bro, he wants to kill people. There's something wrong with him. They thought maybe he was just throwing his friend under the bus and he was the Zodiac killer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Honestly, though, when things like that, like out of the ordinary, start to happen around someone and like you're worried about it, there is nothing wrong with telling an authority figure like, hey, I think something here is wrong.
It's like that thing with Ted Bundy that we'll cover later.
Like, yeah, but it's just so creepy to think like how many things could be prevented if someone who noticed something was wrong stepped up and told someone like, hey, something here is off. Like, maybe just look into this or maybe keep an eye on this person or whatever the case may be, because if you don't say anything, nothing's going to change. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Like, it's just going to get worse.
So 2 days after Allen's death in 1992, Vallejo police served another search warrant and seized property from Allen's residence. He died in 1992. They did another search warrant in 1991. They had just done one in 1991. And
Wow.
in 1992, they're like, he's dead. We're going to do this again and see what we can find. Some random evidence to support his being the killer, apparently, was the fact that he owned and wore a Zodiac brand wristwatch. He lived minutes from where Farron, one of the first victims, lived, and from where one of the killings took place. So there's just all this little bits of evidence all over.
That points to this
but no
being the guy.
definitive evidence that says he did it. So that's why it's just all circumstantial stuff that there's nothing they can do with it. In 2002, San Francisco police were able to create a partial DNA profile from saliva found on stamps and letters of the Zodiac letters. So they were taking DNA off stamps, things like that, because back then you gotta lick them. Now they're just stickers, which is interesting. I'm sure you can get like skin particles though from putting the stickers on envelopes. They compared the DNA to Allen. They also compared it to his friend Cheney, because it could have been either or, right? But both of them didn't match. In March 2018, last year, okay, it was announced that the DNA was from the front of the stamps, not the back. So it could have been anyone.
So it was anyone that touched the stamp.
Yes.
Wow.
It didn't come from the seal either, so Allen was still a suspect. Because if they licked the seal, they could have... it's just...
Why would you do that? That makes no sense. Why would you take it from the front of the stamp? Like, obviously,
DNA
anyone that
was
came into
new.
physical contact with that.
DNA was new.
Yeah, still, like, common sense wasn't.
There have been a number of other suspects as well. Some even say he might have been the Monster of Florence, which was a killer that was killer in Italy that was active between 1968 and 1985. But we'll save that one for another day, maybe. Another thing that's really interesting is that the San Francisco police marked the case inactive in April 2004, but then reopened it sometime before March 2007. So I don't know why they marked it inactive and then opened it up again. Maybe they found something, you know what I mean?
Or maybe they needed to change it for a specific reason, like get some sort of warrant so they could start doing more investigations. Yeah. And they're like, we need to look into this a different way. I don't know.
23andMe. They need that DNA.
Just don't use it from the front of the stamp. Use it from some spot that would have only been the person who sent the letter. But even then, they could have just used a wet sponge, you know?
Ah, yes, wet sponge. The California Department of Justice has had the case remained open since 1969. So they've kept it open the whole time. Hopefully they figure it out. That'd be great. So if you folks are interested, there is the movie called Zodiac that came out in 2007 based on one of Grace Smith's books of the same name. And it stars half the stars from the MCU.
Wow. I know Mark Ruffalo's in it, right?
So, yeah.
And Robert Downey Jr.?
It has Jake Gyllenhaal, which has just been added. It has Robert Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo. I saw that and I was like, what? There's so many in there. Obviously, it's not half the MCU. It's just, that's a lot.
Half the MCU would be like 90 actors.
Yeah, that's just 3 in one small little movie is a lot. it has an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I've heard it's really good.
So it's a really good movie. I really want to watch it. I've never watched it. Go check it out if you guys are interested. I'm really interested in watching it. I think it'd be really cool. It's definitely from the investigative standpoint because there's nothing else you can really do. I'm sure there are other Zodiac Killer movies that are from the killer standpoint maybe, but we don't know any of that information. So I think I'm really interested in watching the Zodiac movie. But yeah, if you guys want to check that out, you go do that. That's my whole story of the Zodiac Killer.
And what's nice now is with this out there, since it is unsolved, as new evidence comes to light or new updates are coming out, we can kind of revisit this thing along with other things that we've covered. Like I know I said I'd go back and cover like Sasquatch, which is very different than the Zodiac Killer, but who knows? Maybe they're the same thing.
Oh my goodness.
Not really, but seriously, like it's nice that we can kind of go back and cover things as more developments occur. But yeah, this one's super fascinating to me
really
because it's
fascinating.
unsolved and there's so much that was tossed out there that seems like fake evidence or stuff to
Right.
kind of throw them off the track, and how many times it seems like they just barely missed catching whoever this person was. So it's definitely terrifying.
Yeah, there's so many different theories that you could totally have on it. Like you were saying, he doesn't want to get caught, so he's waiting 4 months to see if maybe they're on his trail or not. It's just so, it could have been a whole bunch of different people that he just took credit for. But the 37, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And I was reading on History Channel, there are a whole bunch of different murders. And maybe I'll do another episode on all the other different evidence things that they found or something like that. But that'll be way further down the line. So.
For those of you who get really creeped out about stuff like this, I will say these are much harder crimes to commit nowadays. Since since there's a lot more surveillance, first and foremost, there's a lot more people around, and everyone has a communication device in their pocket at all times for the most part. So it's one of those things where always keep your cell phone charged and be aware of where the dead zones are so that you don't get caught in one. And say you get a flat tire in a really creepy area and you know, like, this dead zone's right here, but it's maybe a half a mile up is not a dead zone. It might be worth it to run on a flat for a little while, just saying, because I've definitely thought of that before when I blew a flat.
I was going to say, please learn to change your tire. I had to have my friend teach me how to change a tire a few years ago, and I thought that was probably one of the most important skills that I've had to learn, for real. So yeah, go do that. Everyone, it doesn't matter who you are, you should learn how to do it.
Yeah, indeed, indubitably. But thank you folks for listening, and this was the kickoff for Robin's spooky October of serial killers.
Seasonal serial killers. Wah, 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 wah.
So if anyone has a story that they would like to share with us, it does not have to be related to the Grootslang, and it does not have to be related to the Zodiac Killer, please email storytime@scarish.com or go to any of our social medias and hit us up, or you can go to scarish.com and click on contact us and fill out that form. Robin, if folks wanted to donate to us, how can they do that?
So you can go over to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. That's monthly donations. We have a whole bunch of different tiers. Help us choose our topics, things like that. Head on over, check it out, support. All your support helps us keep this going because goodness knows we need it. And then we have coffee.com/scarishpodcast, and those are one-time donations. Also, all those donations help us upgrade our studio setup.
Right on. Thank you one last time for everyone who listened to episode 95. We're almost
I can't
at
believe
triple
we're
digits.
we're almost at 100.
Yeah,
It's gonna
and
be
really, really good research. You did
Yeah.
a ton of research this
my
this week,
goodness.
Robin. I think this is what's going to happen to you for all of October because these ones are all
These
so
are really
very in-depth.
intense and really in depth.
Yeah, but great work, and we hope you folks enjoyed it. So I think that's just about everything we have. So Robin, send us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll. I was gonna say stalk, but that's kind of creepy too. We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.